everybody. Caitlin Silva here, founder of The Author Mentor, best-selling author, and all about helping aspiring authors to overcome block, time, other hurdles, avoid the pitfalls of today's industry, and finish and successfully publish their books. I'm so excited that you guys are here. Welcome back to the 4-day workshop all about doing exactly that, overcoming block and finishing and publishing your book. So I hope you guys got some great content yesterday, especially if you've been struggling with time, with making the most of your writing time, with prioritizing writing your book, and all of that great stuff. And you got some ideas on some things that you can do to dig in and get some more writing done. So today we're going to be talking about writer's block, because that is probably the biggest issue in today's industry, or really probably with writing of all time, right? Is writer's block and how you can actually deal with that. And so especially if you've been struggling for a long time or any amount of time whatsoever, and you've been struggling with block and just not being able to get your book out the way that you want to, you are going to love today. I believe that there are 5 root causes of writer's block, and I'm going to be sharing each one of those with you and what you can do about it when it comes to writing your book. So the 5 root causes of writer's block are writing outside of your creative flow zone, idea hopping or lack of direction, naysayers, which also leads to the other causes of writer's block, which are self-doubt and then fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, just all kinds of different fears that are going on with that. And you can see how the last 3 kind of tie in together, but we'll dig into all of those details here in just a minute. So root cause number 1, writing outside of your creative flow zone. So what do I mean by this anyway? So I believe that there is a certain time of day for each individual person that is your most productive or most creative time of the day. So this could be a time of day when you feel like during this time of day you tend to just have this spark of energy, or you tend to all of a sudden get these crazy flow of ideas, or anytime that you try to do things and accomplish things during this time of the day, you tend to get a lot more done. So if you think back on a time when you actually were tapping into your flow, everything just flowed like magic and you were getting so much writing done, it felt fantastic. Think of a time of day, and you should notice that it's a consistent time of day for you. Or maybe if it's not about writing, you notice there's a specific time of day consistently where you tend to, like I said, get this burst of energy or this burst of focus, and you're able to get a lot of stuff done during that time of day. This is your natural creative flow zone, and it's really important to know about this zone and know when it is, because what happens is a lot of times writers have this belief they have to be writing every single day, or they try to write outside of this creative flow zone, and they end up trying to force it and not getting as much writing done as they could if they were simply writing in that natural flow zone for themselves. So this time might be early in the morning for you, or maybe in the afternoon, or maybe late at night. I know for me, I tend to have this writing burst of muse really late at night, and sometimes I have to actually tell myself to turn it off so I don't lose my healthy beauty sleep, right? So maybe that's what it looks like for you. But it's important to know when this time of day is so that you can, coupled with the time that we talked about yesterday, tap into it as much as possible so that you can maximize the amount of writing that you're able to get done when you're sitting down to write. So I talked yesterday about if you have a crazy schedule, or you have kiddos, or a lot of different things going on. And so sometimes actually writing in the creative flow zone can be a challenge, right? Especially if you've been struggling with time. And so that's where being intentional and all the things that we talked about yesterday are super important, because they build in and they factor in to when you can actually tap into your creative flow zone. So maybe you can only write on your day off, right? One day or maybe a couple days a week. But you can tap into your creative flow zone on that day, and you can actually be able to get a lot of writing done simply because you're in that zone, in that flow, and able to really make the most of that time because it's coupled with that dynamic time of focus and inspiration and muse and flow, right? If you're finding that this is not something for you and you're not able to really tap into this great time of day, another thing that you can do is you can know the things that help trigger your muse. So for example, have you ever been in the shower and you just all of a sudden had this like download of ideas, right? Or maybe you were driving in the car and all of a sudden you had this huge burst of inspiration. Or maybe it's your favorite music or a favorite soundtrack that you have. If you know exactly what those things are that help to trigger your muse, then whenever you are sitting down in your writing time, you can use those things to help your mind really let go of distractions and other little things going on that are pulling you out of your zone and your flow, right? And you can use those things to help you actually immerse yourself in your zone and really focus in on your book and your idea and your writing so that, again, you can make the most of that writing time and you can get the most writing done possible. So for block number 2, which is lack of direction or idea hopping, they both kind of go hand in hand. So what this looks like is when you just dive into the book and you don't have a clear idea of where the book is going, and you end up getting stuck or losing motivation halfway through, wondering exactly how you got to where you are now and how you're supposed to actually get to the finish line, right? This happens a lot more with fiction than nonfiction, but it can happen on both ends of the spectrum. So what happens is a lot of times is you start to lose that motivation or not know where you're at, and all of a sudden you get inspired for a new idea, right? And so you think, oh, well, I'll just hop on this new idea and work on that for a little bit, and then I'll come back to this old idea later when I get motivation or excitement back for it. What happens is people end up doing this numerous times and never going back to that old idea. So they end up with a bunch of unfinished manuscripts instead of finishing one book and then moving on and finishing the next book. So you can see how this creates a really bad chain of events, right? So it's really important to not only be aware of this, but know how to reinvigorate your motivation and your excitement for the idea that you're working on. Because it's always best to finish one idea, then move on to the next. Now, if you're one of those writers that you do prefer working on multiple projects and that works for you, fantastic. It is super important to know what works for you and to utilize that as much as possible, simply because it caters to your strengths and allows you to get a lot farther. So if that works for you, that's fantastic. But in my experience, most people that try to work on too many things at once end up getting overwhelmed and are not able to keep the fire for one specific idea. And they do end up with several unfinished manuscripts instead of their one finished book and then going on to numerous finished books, right? So what you can do for this is I want you to have either a separate notebook or maybe a file in your computer that's specifically designated for these new ideas, right? So when you're working on your book and you have this new idea pop up and you're feeling super inspired and you're thinking, okay, I want to work on this new idea instead of this other idea that I'm kind of struggling with, right? What you can do is you can take this separate notebook or this separate file in your computer and you can write down what you're thinking for this new idea. So maybe you write down just a summary, or you write down the bullet points that you're thinking about in your mind for the overall content of the book. Write down just enough that you have a clear picture in your mind when you read it again about the whole book and the content and what you were thinking about, so that you can come back to it in the future and remember what the idea was and what you were thinking about and where you were going with it, right? So you want to make sure that you write down enough that you can come back to it and you won't completely lose it. But then once you have that written down, leave it aside. It's a separate notebook, a separate file. It's not intended to be a whole new book that you're working on right now. You're just doing it so that you don't lose it and you have it for later, and then you want to put it aside, okay? And then you want to keep working on the book that you're still working on, right? It's super important that you actually finish one project before moving on to the next. Now, what I'll share with you guys is if you have been struggling with losing motivation, lack of direction, all of that good stuff, one thing that you can do is you can reconnect with the emotional feelings that you initially had when you started writing the current book that you're working on that maybe you're stuck with right now. So maybe it's because this is the book that you've always wanted to see on your shelf, right? This is the book that you've always wanted to read. And even though you're feeling stuck right now, that little ember, that fire of feeling is still within you, right? It's still in your heart. And so by reconnecting to that feeling, just taking a moment, closing your eyes, remembering that feeling and your excitement and your desire for this book, that can help to inspire the motivation for writing this book and for pushing through with the project, right? Or maybe for you, it's because you have this really powerful story to share and you really know that it's going to impact and help other people and really make a difference in other readers' lives, right? So reconnecting with that feeling and thinking about maybe a younger self or a person that you know would massively benefit, and thinking about that person in your mind, and then writing from the perspective of just having a conversation with that person and just sharing with them, and not worrying about the emotions or the difficulties, or if someone's going to judge it, or not worrying about all of those things, but really just focusing on sharing that in a conversational way to try to help either your younger self or the other person, can really help you to let go of all the things that are holding you back, and to be able to move forward with the book and push through the struggles that you might be having right now. So you can see how reconnecting with your why and really emotionally reconnecting with your book can make a big difference, right? Now, another thing that you can do if you're lacking direction is completely just stop where you are right now and kind of go back to the drawing board when it comes to your book, especially if you didn't take the time in the very beginning to flesh out your idea and make sure that you had something solid beginning to end all the way through. Even a loose roadmap can make a big difference, right? So you want to take a step back and think about your book and think, okay, where do I want it to go? Where is it going to end up? Is it maybe going to be a series if it's fiction? Or is there additional stuff that I could talk about if it's nonfiction? You really want to know what the content is that you're wanting to express, and then make yourself even a loose roadmap that goes from beginning to middle to end, so that you have a clear picture. You can stay according to that roadmap so you don't get stuck, and you can actually make it all the way through your book. So maybe you've already worked on some of these things, maybe you haven't, but that should give you a couple of things to work with, especially if you've been especially if you've been struggling with just trying to force your writing and not being able to get into your zone, or just having that problem of multiple unfinished manuscripts, right? Now let's go ahead and dive into the more external sources of writer's block, right? Which are the naysayers, self-doubt, and the fears, which those are internal, but they do tie into some external causes and factors, right? So for the naysayers, right, these are people that could be friends and family, right? They could be loved ones. They could be well-intentioned people or people that mean really well, but they just don't understand your passion and your desire to see your book in print, to be an author, right? And so they may have said things to you like, oh, that's not really a real job, or oh, that's nice, but they don't really know how to encourage you and build you up or believe in you, right? Or maybe it's whenever you were a kid, your parents may have even said some things that discouraged you from pursuing this later in your life. And so now that's reflected in your own internal dialogue and your self-doubt and your beliefs about what you're able to accomplish, right? And you can see how these things are kind of tying in together. Or maybe as you're looking down the road and you're thinking to yourself, maybe you have a tendency to go back through your writing and you're thinking, oh, my writing's not that good. Or what if nobody enjoys this? Or who am I to write this book, and why would anyone listen to what I have to say? Right? And I'm so familiar with all of these, and I completely understand what it's like thinking those things. I know that it can be so challenging, and it can really paralyze you from being able to move forward and believe in what you're able to accomplish with your book, right? So if you are struggling with any of these things, I want to share with you that first and foremost, having community and having other people involved is so, so important. I think so many times writers have this image and this idea that you have to lock yourself in a closet or lock yourself away and put do not disturb on the door, right? And it's like an isolated, you have to be a lone wolf in order to actually get your book done and be successful as a writer. And I want to share with you that the opposite is actually true. So going back even further, I don't know if you guys know this or if you've already heard about this, but C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien were actually part of a secret group, a secret club in college together with some other gentlemen, and they would meet together at night, and they would read to each other what they were working on, and they would give each other feedback and criticism and really just improved each other's writing. And so they actually, at the time, were working on what is now very famous works, right? And so that was a critical foundation in them becoming who they became as authors and as writers. And so they went on to publish, of course, The Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia and the stories that we really know and love today. And the point in me sharing this is that they absolutely did not approach the writing game 100% alone, right? I mean, sure, they did their writing probably by themselves, but they had a community. They had feedback. They had input. They had encouragement. They had constructive criticism from fellow writers that could understand the process and the emotions and tell it to them in a way that they could understand, internalize, and improve, right? And so my point in sharing this is that especially if you're struggling with naysayers or you're struggling with judging your own writing and going back through and thinking, oh my gosh, is this even worth it? Or is my writing even good? It's so important to have community and have other input on your books and to have other writers that are not going to put you down, that are going to build you up, that are going to support you, encourage you, and all of that good, amazing stuff, right? So if you're not already part of a great writers group, I would highly recommend joining the Passionate Writers community that I host on Facebook. You guys should have had a link in the introduction email when you signed up for the 4-day workshop. But if not, look out for it. I send the link out all the time. You could also look it up on Facebook, Passionate Writers Community, and request to join. So I absolutely would invite you guys to join. It's a great community with people that are supportive, that build each other up, that have great things to share and great ideas for feedback and input. And so I absolutely welcome it and invite you guys to come. If you're not comfortable with that, find a great writers group that works for you. Maybe there's a local book club at your library, or maybe there's a local NaNoWriMo club that participates in the NaNoWriMo activities every year that you could become a part of and become more active in, right? There's all kinds of different ways for you to connect and become involved in a writing community that will build you up, encourage you, push you, and help you to actually have the support you need to succeed, as opposed to feeling like you're alone and you're being put down and you don't have anyone that really believes in you. So I absolutely encourage you to get involved, find a writers community that works for you, plug in, and then get their support and their feedback, because you are absolutely not alone. And I guarantee that your own inner critic should never, ever be the judge of what's good enough, especially with your own creativity and your writing. Because writing can be something that's extremely vulnerable, right? It can be amazing, it can be empowering, but it can also be terrifying, right? And so it's important to have that other input that can build you up and excite you and help you feel motivated to continue to keep going no matter what, right? Now, as far as for the last kind of root cause, which I kind of touched on but haven't dug into yet, the fear of failure and the fear of rejection and all of that. That definitely does tie into the naysayers and the self-doubt and all of that. What I want to share with you guys on the fear is I want you to consider two really big things. So one, I want you guys to know that failure is actually part of the success journey, right? A lot of people have this idea that on the journey there's either fail or succeed, and that's it. But the truth is that a lot of times you have to fail in order to succeed, right? And I can't be quoted on that because that's a famous quote from somebody else. But the point is that when we fail and we stumble and we have to struggle a little bit, we learn, right? We learn, we grow, we improve, and then we do so much better next time. Just like Thomas Edison with the light bulb, who knows how many times, right? And so the point is that a book is always a long game. It's not like you have to write one book and publish that book and it has to be perfect. And if it's not, then that's it. And you can never publish another book. That's not the reality, right? The reality is that it's never set in stone. You can always edit. You can always make changes. You can always republish. There's first editions and second editions and 10th editions for that reason, right? They're always making updates and changes and edits and all of that good stuff, right? And so I want you guys to consider that, again, it's never set in stone. And even if one book doesn't do so well, you can always go on and continue and do much better on the next one, right? So a book is all about the long game. The other thing that I want you guys to consider when it comes to that fear of failure and rejection, I want you to think, ultimately, fear can be a very powerful thing, right? It can make you feel completely paralyzed and prevent you from being able to move forward. But fear can also be an indicator that you're heading in the right direction. Sometimes when you're really scared of something, it means that it's something that you actually need to do. And part of your survival mode, right, is trying to tell you that it's not safe because it's unknown, but that doesn't mean it's bad for you. And so I want you guys to consider the possibility of success instead of just only viewing it in the possibility of failure. If you instead think, okay, on one token, I'm thinking, oh, what if I fail? What if I flip that around and say, what if I succeed? What does that look like? And really paint that picture for yourself. Take some time, write it down, paint that picture for yourself of what it looks like if you were to actually succeed. And then once you have that written out, you have that visual in your mind, I want you to keep that as your focus. Maybe you need to post it on your wall in your writing space. Maybe you need to put it on your desktop on your computer, whatever that looks like for you. But do something that gives you that reminder and reminds you, hey, this is possible. This is what the vision is, right? And thinking about it in terms of only the positive possibilities, because then it helps to really quiet those fears and say, you know what, yes, that possibility is there, but I'm not going to let fear cripple me and hold me back and prevent me from achieving the dreams that I have just burning within me, right? Especially if this is something that you've been wanting to write a book, you feel like you have a book to write and to share that you know that readers will actually enjoy it, or that it will impact and help people if it's nonfiction. Letting yourself really focus on that instead of just the fear can help you to be able to push forward despite the fear, right? And really make progress and get your book done. So I hope that makes sense. That touched on all the 5 root causes of writer's blocks and some things to consider and to do, especially if you've been struggling for any amount of time with your book. And I hope that you're able to push forward and make some significant progress as you're moving forward with your book. So thanks so much for watching for today. I'm so excited because tomorrow I'm going to be talking about the #1 thing that really holds would-be authors back, especially once they finish their manuscript, and what you can do about it as you're pushing forward in the publishing journey, and also some things to consider as you're considering publishing and all of that fun stuff. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. I can't wait for then, and you guys have a fantastic rest of your day.